Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. As usual, today we have a special guest, but before we get into that, today was the funeral of the Honorable Elijah Cummings. And, you know, it was great seeing both Republicans and Democrats alike talking about this great, real public servant, somebody that believed in everything America is supposed to be. And he believed if it wasn't there, he was going to be one of those who helped take it there. Even on his deathbed, he was busy signing subpoenas to ensure that we got a good hearing on the impeachment, or the hearings on the impeachment of likely the most corrupt president this country has ever seen. But the other thing that got to me is something that Chuck Todd said. Chuck Todd was sort of in amazement. And you know, Chuck Todd surprises me sometimes. He sat down and he sat next to the other commentator. And he said, you know what is the strangest thing? That a funeral of such importance, of a funeral of such, that the president, meaning President Trump, isn't even really missed. It is almost like a reprieve from the president. All people of the country, all the Congress people, senator, irrespective of ideology, sitting down and praising this guy. So that was amazing. But the other thing was first listening to a Bill Clinton, talking about presidents now, listening to a Bill Clinton and his eloquence. And he's getting up in age now. I mean, I'd never, it's hard for me to imagine Bill as old as he is right now. And I don't even know if he's all that old, but he kind of acts kind of old in the way he talks. But I mean, it's still there. His eloquence is still there. But then Barack Obama come on in, and he comes on to the stage. And with listening to President Bill Clinton and President Barack Obama, you sit down and say, my God, why can't we have the eloquence of these guys again? Why can't we have the intellect of these guys again? Why can't we have the humility of these guys again? Because I mean, when you saw it, you sat down and you wondered, my God, what has happened to America? My God, what is happening to America? So it was great seeing all these great, these presidents and old timers, Kwasi Nkrumah, the old holder of Cummings' seat, and everybody going out there and talking about the kind of man this man was. Tough, very tough, but very, very, very fair. So, folks, I just enjoyed watching that, and I think most people who saw that would have enjoyed that as well. It was just a sight to see. But anyhow, so what is our program going to be today? What is our program's going to be today? We're going to speak to it. Well, let me go ahead and cue the program up. Why am I just asking? Let me cue the program up. The title of the show today is Edgar Villanueva discusses his book, Colonizing Wealth and Philanthropy. Philanthropy is a double-edged sword. Edgar Villanueva points out several inconvenient truths about the giving industry and what must be done. And you know, if you're on Politics Done Right, we're going to put a political edge to that. I kind of touched on the donation that Smith gave to that, I don't remember the name of the black college, and also Langone gave to the students at the New York University for healthcare. You know, sounds great and it looks beautiful on paper. But what are the real implications, or what does that really mean? Those are the things that we have to ask. Welcome aboard, Lawrence Sims. Welcome aboard. Those are the things that we have to ask, right? So Edgar Villanueva has several messages for those who give, or philanthropists, that is. Edgar Villanueva is a philanthropy expert and author of Decolonizing Wealth. And, you know, he does quite a few other things. I'm not going to go ahead and read who he is again, because I think I already did that in the program as it starts. So what I want to do is, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with El Señor Villanueva. And then on the way back, we have a whole lot of other stuff that I want to talk to you about. In fact, some very important stuff that we need to talk about after this. So let's go ahead and get that started. Morehouse, thank you very much, Lawrence. Morehouse. Sometimes you forget these things. You know, you're getting up there in age. What can I say? You forget these things. But anyhow, without further ado, we have El Señor Edgar Villanueva. Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies. Folks, we have a treat for you today. We are with the one and only Edgar Villanueva. Edgar Villanueva is a globally recognized expert on social justice philanthropy. He serves as board chair of directors of Native Americans in Philanthropy. He's also a board member to the Andros Family Fund, a national foundation that works to improve outcomes for the vulnerable youth. Edgar currently serves as vice president of programs and advocacy at the Strat Foundation for Public Education, where he oversees grant investments and capacity building for educational justice campaigns across the United States. He has also recently teamed up with How to Get Away with Murder actor and racial justice activist Matt McGurry for the Power to Give, a night of decolonizing wealth to connect Hollywood actors and activists to movement building work across the U.S. Edgar Villanueva, welcome to Politics Done Right, sir.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on.
Look, it seems like you've been a kind of a busy guy.
Yeah, I have definitely, as my mother would say, there's no grass growing under my feet.
I tell you what, I don't even know, you know, I've written a couple of books and I'm on my third and I just can't get past chapter 4. I don't see how you got the time to do what you're doing right now. So commendations, my friend.
Thank you.
Now, tell me a little bit about, first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am originally from North Carolina. I'm an enrolled member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, which is a Native American tribe in southeastern North Carolina. We have about 60,000 members of our community. And so that's sort of the perspective and community that I come from. And I have been a person that has, raised by a very strong mother, a single mother who was a service provider. She was a domestic worker and really instilled in me a desire to give back and to be of service to others. And this idea of philanthropy, of community, although we didn't have a lot of financial resources, we were rich with relationships. And that is, something that has guided me throughout the work that I do in the nonprofit sector. As an adult, most of my career has been in institutional philanthropy, which is this sector where wealthy folks and corporations start foundations to fund nonprofit organizations. And I'm a very rare commodity, so to speak, in that space. Often where I'm coming from a background of poverty and being a person of color, finding myself in leadership in that space. And those are the issues that I write about. And I'm just very passionate about moving financial resources and investment back into communities of color. So that's pretty much who I am in a nutshell.
Well, I mean, you raise in that one little prose, you raise something that really I think we need to kind of put a point on. You spoke about philanthropy. First of all, what does philanthropy mean to you?
So, philanthropy to me personally is being, I think of this indigenous worldview or this saying around all my relations. And it's an inherent belief that we are all connected. So, you are my relative. We are connected to each other and we are connected to the planet. And so, we have a responsibility and a privilege to care for one another. Literally, the word philanthropy in the Latin means love of mankind. And so it is simply about love for me.
Well, I mean, the reason I said that is whenever a lot of people these days hear philanthropy, they think about a very rich person with capital, with cash. And one thing I noticed in one of the bios I read about you is that you considered your mother a real philanthropist. And, I figured when I started reading it, I figured, oh, here I go. I'm interviewing this guy who's going to tell all these rich people that they're doing it all wrong. And he's some rich guy coming along to do something. And then I realized that the philanthropy that you're talking about is the works performed by your mother made her philanthropic. Tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So, my mother is absolutely a person that did not have financial resources. She is actually still a domestic worker and has a career that she's very proud of and is, finds dignity in that work. But I don't come from a family with wealth. We think of being in service to community and giving back to others as a responsibility that we have as residents of this world. Just being good folks in community, loving on each other, caring for each other. But the way that we think of philanthropy, as you described, as rich folk who write checks to charities in a way that's transactional, is not the way that my community sees philanthropy. In fact, if you go into many Native communities and you talk to elders in those communities and you say, what is the word philanthropy? It's not even a word that they've heard or that they might be familiar with. And so it's really thinking about beyond financial resources and writing a check, are there other ways that we can give back that are much more relational and help build community with each other and to tear down this paradigm of the us versus them?
Great. All right. Tell me a little bit about you have a new book out.
Hmm.
And
Relatively new.
relatively new. Yeah, relatively new. Okay. New for me. Okay, called Decolonizing Wealth. That's a provocative title. Why?
Provocative titles sell books. Well, it is quite provocative, and I wondered as we were going into production if we were making the right choices around that. But the word decolonizing is a word that shouldn't be super triggering for people if we actually understand what we mean by decolonizing and what we mean by wealth. For me, in this book, what I tried to do is to lay out a history of how wealth has been accumulated in the United States. We live in this country in a society where wealth has been amassed, in part due to slave labor and stolen land and genocide. We have a very dark history of how wealth has been accumulated through colonization in this country that we as a community have never come to terms with. We have not had a public process of truth and reconciliation. We haven't had any official apologies from our government. And so we find ourselves present day looking at all types of social issues and seeing this huge gap in the wealth in this country of who has money and who doesn't have money. We also see major disparities around outcomes around education and economic opportunities, so forth and so on. And a lot of these problems that we're grappling with present day as a community all stem back to our history and this history of colonization. And so that's the point of this book, is like understanding the harmful effects and how the atrocity that colonization actually was on this country for indigenous people, for people of color, for black folks, but also for white folks. It's a little known fact that white folks also have experienced trauma as a result of this type of history in this country. And so, understanding that history and how wealth has been amassed, I'm putting forth this idea that we need a lot of healing from this trauma. And so, decolonizing is really simply about healing. It's recognizing the trauma that exists in our communities because of history and getting on a path to healing. And then knowing that money and wealth accumulation has been this thread all along this path. And so money and wealth and the accumulation of that has resulted in trauma, but we have the opportunity to use wealth and resources differently to help facilitate the healing.
Now, when I said provocative, I mean I really mean that, because you are postulating that, because we know all those, the mega rich, except for a few like Oprah or others that we call new wealth, are really on old wealth. But I could actually draw a line towards Oprah's wealth as being one that has a negative effect as well. I mean that was built on the backs of the least as well. But I don't want to start there. How do we first approach and make the connection between today's wealthy who believe they are deserving of it, and I'm talking mostly old wealth as first, and us trying to take back what was stolen?
Right. So I think of poverty, my definition of poverty is that poverty is a product of public policy and theft that has been facilitated by white supremacy. And so when we
Explain.
think about why poverty exists, right, we have to acknowledge that we have a history of public policy in this country that has allowed for wealth to be concentrated in white communities. So even when we talk about the GI Bill and some of these legislation over different policies over time that help create the middle class and help get folks ahead in this country, even within those public policies, baked into those policies were actual racist kind of components that did not benefit
Redlining.
everyone, right? So, for example, the GI Bill, right, did not apply to farm workers or domestic workers like my family and a lot of people of color who were in those professions. So we did not benefit from the GI Bill. And so public policy definitely has privilege mostly white folks and people with wealth over time. When I say theft, I of course am referring to our history of slavery and genocide and extraction. Folks who have been in power and have held wealth in this country for many, many decades have benefited from that extraction and from that theft. And even if, in present day, we want to remove ourselves from those grotesque acts, and maybe folks are saying, well, I just made my money in tech in the last 5 years, I have nothing to do with that. You still have to acknowledge that in this country historically, especially if you are white and you had the opportunity to go to like fantastic schools, and that you have been privileged and given a leg up because of our history in this country. Which leads to that part of that definition where I said this process or this product of poverty has been facilitated by white supremacy. All of our systems and policies and institutions in this country have white supremacy types of ideology baked into them that has privileged white people. And so that is why you see poverty existing in communities of color at such a much more concentrated rate because of that history, those policies, and also, frankly, because of white supremacy.
Now, you use the concept of, you talked about these philanthropic organizations that think they're doing good, but in reality, they really are, they're probably making themselves feel good, as if they're doing something, as if they have the solutions. Why don't you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So We have a very unique tax system in the United States that allows folks with wealth or corporations to start these foundations um, and get a major tax write-off, right? So there's the first win for them, and,
Mm-hmm.
and you might say a loss for the public. The funds that go into charitable philanthropic organizations are tax exempt. And so in the United States, that number is $900 billion. There's
Mm-hmm.
$900 billion
Imagine that.
sitting, right? And that's money that would have gone to public education, elder care, transportation, to the safety net, things that we need as a community. Now, I'm not saying that those are bad people for starting foundations, that it's permissible by the law. I think many of those folks actually have really good intentions that, we've made this money, we want to give back. I don't think they mean any harm and actually want to help, but you have to examine and explore what is where does democracy come into play with that. That because you have a lot of money, you actually get the right to drive resources and determine how they will be invested in the community,
And
right?
that's the magic. Yes. Yes.
Versus our democratic process that we have to put those resources into, the government for those elected officials to decide. So that's one piece of it. Another important point to bring out is that with the $900 billion in charitable assets, what a lot of folks don't know is that only a small percentage of those resources actually ever leave banks and leave investment portfolios to get to community. Only about 5 to 7%. The majority of this tax exempt charitable capital is tied up in investment portfolios that are actually potentially harmful to people and to the planet. And so it makes me ask the question, what is the net value of philanthropy if we have a few dollars that we are doing good with, but the majority of our dollars are going into harmful and extractive industries?
I mean, that is so important. I mean, you remember when Mr. Smith, the billionaire, gave quite a bit of money to, I don't remember which of the black universities that he did. And
Hmm.
everybody was excited and so forth. And I took the other tact. I said, well, this guy is a guy who gets a return over 15% per year on on his investments. He decides to give $40 million to a university. First of all, that's more than $40 million worth of advertising. The goodwill, everybody loves that. So, I mean, that's a hell of a profit from advertising. But here it was my biggest concern. Some of the monies that he makes hurts the same people with gentrification of the areas that he's invested in and all of that is what made the lives of many of these people more difficult. And to go ahead and then say, I'll take care of a few hundred of them, it is like getting a break for doing evil, getting a forgiveness that costs less for what you're effecting.
No, you're right on. I think that is the truth and the reconciliation that I'm asking foundations and folks with wealth to consider. I think that, on the surface, I would like to think that he was not deliberately planning, like, oh, I need to save face, I need to change my reputation, so let me do this thing, right? But you're so right that philanthropy often is serving as a reputation builder or boost for folks with wealth who are invested in the exact systems and type and investment portfolios that are harming the very people we're trying to help. If you have those level of resources, why not think about how to get at the root causes of inequality and invest in systemic and policy changes that are going to really be transformative versus sprinkling in a few dollars here and there at the problem. And so this is what you see happening time and time again with billionaires in this country. And this is why folks are calling for a moratorium on billionaires, and billionaires may feel possibly under attack. And I'm also including foundations in this conversation to consider the work that they are doing, where you have foundations under the very same roof that are funding criminal justice reform with their small percentage of grant making, but the same foundations are invested in private prisons and their through their investment portfolios. And so where's the truth in that? And we have to understand or ask ourselves with philanthropy, are we really about trying to see transformation in our communities and use these resources and this privilege to really affect change? Or are we really just about doing some good and getting some credit and maintaining the status quo that is benefiting us, right? No one, no millionaire, no billionaire is getting more poor because they are starting a foundation or writing this big check, right? No one is going to be less well off the following year. So these are absolutely, there's a lot of self interest in making these contributions if we're honest about it.
I think you're way too kind with what you think philanthropy is all about. I've always thought that philanthropy has always been self-serving, and that if a let me give another example. I think if we look at Langone and paying off the student loans for people in New York who are going to medical school. My daughter's in med school right now. She'll probably get out of school with $500,000 worth of debt. Most doctors that are going to med school will end up with several $100,000 worth of debt. Now, Langone is a part of the problem because Langone does not support increasing tax rates across the board to help fund these type of institutions. They do not support policies like Medicare for All that will institute policies that educate doctors so that they don't have to make $500,000 a year to save. These are the people that are. You mentioned earlier in the commentary that you just said. You said that you hope they were actually looking for systemic change. My thing is that they're not looking for systemic change. They're trying to maintain the system by putting a facade of goodness from the the facade of goodness from the capital hoarders, and in doing so, give people the less read people the belief that, oh, these deserving wealthy people think so much of us that they are willing to help us out, when the reality is we are helping them out. Their wealth got created by us, not they. There's nothing. The fact that a Donald Trump can be a billionaire, assuming that he is, means that it doesn't take a whole lot of intellect to become a billionaire. It just takes somebody who wants to hoard capital.
You're right. I'm with you 100%. No, you're right. I think that I absolutely agree with you. And when you look at the origins of this industry, philanthropy, most foundations, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them now, most of them were created in the last 10 years because wealthy folks are actually being advised by their wealth managers that they should create a foundation to have this tax shelter. And so when you look at what's happening and the origins and the history of philanthropy, with the Rockefeller Foundation and why they started up, you will see that thread all throughout, is that in general, this industry exists to continue building wealth and to amass more wealth for the 1% versus actually creating change in communities.
Yeah, that's important. Now, in your book, and I hadn't read, I got to this section, but there are times when a table of contents is just so well laid out that you look at it and you say, wow, look at those steps. Grieve, apologize, listen, relate, represent, invest, and repair. I think you said there's an indigenous rule to how you can make philanthropy in a manner that really does what people think it's intended to do.
Yeah, I do. And let me just say that my approach to what I'm offering to philanthropy is an incremental approach. I think that, in many ways, the entire industry needs to be burned down to the ground and reimagined. But I do think there are many things that we could do better under the current system. And the steps that I outline, I call them steps of healing, are for philanthropy, but they're also just for all of us as people who are descendants of slaves or indigenous folks or even colonizers, colonial settlers. We all carry a lot of trauma and pain in our lives because of the history of this country. So the steps of healing here are for invitation for us as individuals, for us as family members, and for us as a country to think about what we need to do to get on a path to healing and truth and reconciliation. We are at a point in this country where we are so torn apart and so polarized. And I often feel that there's just no way forward to bring us together as a community. And given, the way that I came to these steps was really through looking at principles of restorative justice, which came out of an indigenous perspective or indigenous practices, and wondering if there was a way for us to apply that to our lives, and especially for those of us who move resources and move money, because money is so deeply connected to the wrongs that have been done towards folks. So that's sort of the premise behind these 7 steps to healing.
Now, have you found a great reception for the book within the philanthropic community at all?
Actually, I have, and I didn't know what was going to happen when I put it out there. If I would be blacklisted, and I will say that there's probably a couple reasons why. One is philanthropy is an extremely polite sector where we all like sort of move through the world like we're good people and we don't call each other out or say things. So that's why I was a little nervous, because I went there in this book and kind of spoke my truth. And so I think if there are folks who oppose the book, they're just keeping quiet because they don't want to be, not polite. But I will say overwhelmingly, though, that this book has been super well received. I have keynoted so many conferences, and the book is selling like crazy. And I know that many foundations have communicated to me how they are grappling with the material and going through their strategic planning processes. Their boards are reading the book together, and they're really trying to understand how they can get to a deeper, more intentional action beyond sort of just checking some boxes around diversity, but really examining how they can, get to a place of restoring and getting into a right relationship with community. And that looks like a lot of different things. I've had, one foundation in Seattle told me they read this book and they decided to liquidate the assets of the foundation and just go out of business and return those resources back to the community. And
Wait, you're saying your book, after they read the book, they decided to dissolve?
Yes, yes, right. I was floored. So yes, that I'm a big supporter of the idea of foundations not being in perpetuity, but to consider sunsetting. And so, yeah, the board chair 2 weeks ago or so, I was at a meeting and he sought me out and he said, "I read your book. I didn't like it. I'll just be honest." And then he said, "I read it a second time, and the second time something really hit him to spark this conversation with the board about these resources." And they made a decision that there was, no need to be in perpetuity, that in the next 5 years they would spin down the foundation. Another foundation in Montreal said that they read the book and decided that they would take 10% of their assets, so not their grant making, but 10% of the corpus, and just hand that over to First Nations people there in Montreal. And so there have been very real tangible actions that folks have taken. And I think the response to the book in general speaks to an appetite for truth. I still work in philanthropy, and I'm at a conference right now as we're speaking. And, folks in this work, many of them, it's not our money, but we're in this system. There
Mm-hmm.
is a sincerity that I find often where folks want to do right with these resources and see change in communities and want to invest in communities that have been redlined. And I think the response to the book really validates that appetite, at least to begin thinking about the possibilities and to imagine what philanthropy may look like in a different way.
No, I don't think this is necessarily a part of the book, but how do we uh, the thing about it is when you have philanthropy, the thought about it is we take a look at Bill Gates. Bill Gates have several $billion, and he also has a concept, an educational concept that he believes in. So he uses his money to promote the educational concept that he believes in, and a lot of people agree with it. They love it, but most, I think, deep down, don't. It's just that he's the person with the money.
Right.
Good thing, bad thing. I think it's a horrendous thing, and I think what it is not only a patriarchal thing, but an elite. I don't want to say elitist, but a thing that says, because I have capital which I earned on your back, but it's mine, I can go ahead and decide the type of educational system or the type of indoctrination system I'd like going forward.
I agree 100%. I think it is an erosion of our democracy. It's horrific. I think with people with wealth in these foundations need to consider two things. One is really turning to communities that they're interested in helping and finding a way to sincerely listen and allow those folks to decide what the solution should be and support those solutions. When we don't live in a community, and are not impacted by these issues, we have no idea what folks really need.
Right.
We can read research, we can do whatever, but it is so disrespectful to go into a community assuming that you know. There are so many ways. I mean, one way to do that, there are funds that have been started up by people of color who are connected to those communities where you could just turn over the capital. I have a fund that's called Liberated Capital, where I'm encouraging folks that are interested in supporting indigenous communities and other communities of color to just put the money here. Like, we don't need your expertise, so to speak, but we do need your capital, and we'll take it. And we will ensure that that money gets to folks in our communities that are accountable to communities and are on the front lines of leading change. And so there are different ways, if you have wealth, to invest and give money back that are not harmful potentially to communities in a way that this education reform agenda has been.
It would be nice if more do that, and not just think that because I am the owner of the capital, not the earner of the capital, but the owner of this capital, I decide how this capital is going to be disposed of. I mean, personally, I think we need a lot more regulations, government control, we the people control, given that we the people are the one who develop the wealth. Edgar Villanueva is a globally recognized expert on social justice, and he is the author of Decolonizing Wealth. It's been my pleasure, Edgar, to have you on Politics Done Right. I thank you so kindly for being here, and I hope to see what other books you're going to come up with, and it's great that you're changing the system.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be on the program.
Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed talking to him. I have a few more people lined up for interviews. I don't have all the dates set up yet, but we have some other good ones that are coming. Anyhow, if you feel like calling, 646-716-5812. Again, that number is 646-716-5812. Before I get into the other part of the program, today something interesting happened. I needed to. I'm doing some stuff, some financial stuff here, and I had to get, where the insurance company sends you sends a person to your house to go ahead and take your blood pressure and your height, your weight, that kind of a stuff. And anyhow, to put it bluntly, I was just modifying my insurance, period. And anyhow, so there's a woman who came to do it. And, I like to talk to people. Well, I had a great conversation with her. This was, we started talking. And we started talking about healthcare, and she was talking about her sisters and having some people that she knows they're at the doctor all of the times, and they're being prescribed pills and all that kind of stuff. So she looked at me and she said, and I just told them, you are part of the reasons our healthcare is so high. And you know what? She's right. I mean, a lot of people go to the doctor when they don't really need to go to the doctor, or they feel a little pain and they go to the doctor. They feel a little something and they go to the doctor for no real reason, right? But anyhow, I looked at her. And by the way, this is a woman about my age, a white woman. And I looked at her and I said, she started making some other statements on healthcare. And I said, but you're a Republican, aren't you? And I just assumed based on the way she was catering the message. I said, but you're a Republican, right? And she said, yeah. And she said, why? And I said, because you are doing exactly what I see many people do. She's a Republican, but you know what was so interesting about the entire thing was that she was pretty darn progressive. You know, you don't see a lot of that anymore. Somebody articulate that. But before that, she said, why are you asking if I'm a Republican? Or did I say something that? And I said, no. I said, you were actually speaking very progressive, but just the way you intoned it, it was clear that you were Republican. And then we got into talking, and she's doing her work, so she's not sure how she should speak, if she could be frank, because again, she's on her job. And I'm like, oh no, I'm open, and let's talk. So we got into a whole lot of talking, and I mean, I think she probably stayed here 45 minutes to an hour longer than she needed to, because the conversation was so good. But it turns out that the subject went on to race. I don't quite remember how it got there, but it turns out that her daughter is married to a Mexican guy. Apparently, the Mexican guy may be somewhat dark, and she told me she felt comfortable enough to tell me an interesting story that I thought after she was done and she was about to leave. I said, you know what what I feel bad about? I would have asked you to tell me that story on camera with my phone. And she said, I don't like to do cameras or whatever, but I want to tell that story because I just found it so enlightening. Her daughter is married to a Mexican guy. Her family is not very inclusive, none of her family is at all. So everybody knew it was going to be kind of a problem when that occurred. But the interesting thing about it was her kid, her daughter, her grandson, the daughter of her daughter's kid, whose dad is Mexican, looks very, very, with all the Indian type looking, Hispanic look, Latino look. And she said they were going through pictures. She and her grandson going through pictures. And he looked at the pictures and he said, but Grandma, I look like all those people from Pasadena. And she said, yes. And what happened is her grandson was 5 years old. And it was his first realization that he actually looked Mexican and not white. And she said she was cooking, and she got off from cooking, and she sat down with her grandson. And this is the type of communication I wish people used to have. Because I looked at this woman, I said, I'm so proud of the way you handled it. She said, she sat him down, and she said, she explained, first of all, that his grandfather on one side was white, German, and whatever. His mother, she was white, German, etc., and all these other things. But that his dad was Mexican, and like all those other people on the thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what she's telling her grandson right now. And she said the grandson looked at her and said, but Mom, or Grandma, what am I? That's what he said. What? And she said, you are whatever or whoever you want to be. And she said, well, your name, you have a Spanish last name. If you want to be Mexican, you can be Mexican, but you don't have to be. You can be whoever you want to be. And then she said he still looked kind of confused or, just having an issue with exactly who he was, growing up in a white world. And, so she said, I'm Cajun. So she goes ahead and she says, think about this, honey. And she talks about making gumbo. And she says, you start out with the gumbo and it doesn't taste all that good, right? All by itself, it doesn't taste all that good. And then he said, okay. And then she said, and then you start putting all those spices and you start putting all the different seasonings and all of that. And you mix all these things up together and the flavor is then so good. I mean, it's a great flavor after you mix that gumbo. And this grandson knows his gumbo. It's like, yeah, Grandma, the gumbo is really good. And then she said, well, you are like that gumbo. And she said he lit up. He lit up. I like that. I am gumbo. I'm like gumbo. And that is how she brought him to her to his multiculturalism, right? But we went into, after she stayed here for a while, we went into a whole lot of other stories of her life and her family. And she also broke down and she told me a story. She said, there is one story that has bothered me my entire life. And, you know, she kind of got some tears in her eyes when she told me this story. She said her grandfather was a Pentecostal minister. I think it was a Pentecostal minister. And all that was way back, you know, probably, I don't know, 60 years ago, her grandfather. And she said the church was a very well-integrated church. And as soon as her father took over, that church became an all-white church. She said she's from a very little community in Louisiana, probably half and half. And then she said that, and I mean, she said the church became white. And she said when she was growing up, she knew there was something wrong there because it's not how it used to be. She knew there was something wrong there. And then she said it really got to her when one day, she's an adult now, she has 2 daughters, and she said the 2 daughters are on the outside, and she heard them talking to a kid. It turns out she was talking to, I think it was probably on a Sunday, because apparently they had to then leave and go to church. But she said it was on a Sunday, or I guess it was a Sunday, and she's on the porch watching her 2 girls and this black little girl play. And she said, and then she teared up, she said they were having a good time. They were having such a good time. And she said, I wanted to invite the black girl with my 2 daughters to church. And it hurt me to the core. I couldn't do it because I knew I couldn't take her into the church. And she said, I have taken, she hesitated before she told me that. And she said, it had bugged me all my life that I can't do that. And she said, now in church, it's ironic. Now in church, there's this little girl that has taken to me, a little black girl that's taken to her in church. And it's just under her arms all of the times and calls her grandma. But I mean, the way she told the story, it's a story that many times, unless you have garnered the confidence among people, you don't hear these kinds of stories, or these people tell you these kind of stories. And what was wonderful about it, right, is that it shows you, a lot of people hear things, a lot of people know things, but they don't really know what happened behind closed doors. They don't really know what happens when in a white house, in an all-white household, when your ears are not there, or in a black household when the ears is not there, unless people come out and talk about certain things. And it's a shame that we still have these issues to talk about, right? But we do. But what if, like, I looked at her and I told her she should be she's very religious now. I think she's probably always religious. I told her she needs to be a testimony to people. We were talking about peer pressure, and I said there's a whole lot of peer pressure out there. There are a lot of good people out there, a lot of good people that want to do good things. But there's also a lot of peer pressure out there. And that peer pressure stops folks from doing what they really want to do, just like it stopped her from taking that kid to church, because she know, what will they say when I bring this little black girl into my church? And, but you could see that it continued to haunt her, that is something she wanted to do. That is something the little girls would have wanted to do. And that is something she didn't do well. She, as far as I'm concerned, her testimony on this issue, her testimony on the way she's spoken to her grandkid, her grandkid who is half Latino, etc., is a testimony to that first of all, the empathetic person that she is, and more so than just empathetic, just damn good person. You know, there are times that she wanted to tell me certain things, and you could see she was like, well, eventually she knew that there was nothing that she could say that would knock or take me off keel or anything like that, because that is what I think we all need to do, right? Communicate and talk, because ultimately what you find out is like, oh my God, is it that easy? Is it so easy to be just friends? Is it so easy? It's just so easy to really learn the truth and not fall for the stigmas out there? Is it not true that is so easy to do? So she stayed here long. She said, oh my God, I'm here a long time and I need to go to my other appointment and all of that. But I just thought I wanted to share that story with you. And I hope I wasn't too chappy with the story, because the one thing I'm not super good at is telling a story that somebody told me. It's better when I sit down, write it and think about it. But just saying it, the story that I just heard, sometimes it's not quite interesting. But I think it's like I told her, you know, she's a Christian, I'm a humanist. I told her, in her religion, my friend, you're going to heaven. Because I've just given you two stories that I thought I should tell, right? But she had so many other stories to tell. And what I told her, these stories are not for you. These stories are not for the people in your immediacy. These stories ought to be told. You ought to tell, because, and the other thing that I kind of sugar up on, I said, you know, when I communicate with an audience in general, with an audience at large, when I'm not on the radio, if I'm on a screen or something, the first thing people have to get through is my hue. The second thing they have to get through is the preconceived notions of the hue. And then they start to listen. And I told her, with a lot of people, you don't have to in the beginning. Okay, 702, I'm coming to you. Let's see. Come on in, 702.
Hi. This is my first time. Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Oh, hi. I wanted to talk to you about your story about the Christian woman, and about how she came to grips with the reality of church, and different bigotries in church and things like that.
Sure.
And I thought that was a very good story. For me, I always I grew up in the church somewhat myself. I'm like you these days. I'm a humanist. For me,
could you talk into the phone, sir, because you're kind of dropping out sometimes?
Oh, I'm very sorry. I apologize. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, good. These days, I have migrated away from the church. I consider myself more of a humanist, much like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to me because part of the reason that I got away from the church so much, and I mostly went to church in a white Southern Baptist church, is because there was a lot of bigotry.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't. I went to church Sunday after Sunday, and I mostly saw people like myself. And white people like myself,
mm-hmm.
and they weren't like very outwardly, it's not like they were doing anything overtly, bigoted or promoting segregation. But as I started like looking more into the history of church and what it has stood for, I found myself increasingly at odds that I don't understand how there are so many progressive people, even like good people that I respect, that can go to church, because a lot of the hatred in this country finds its I'm not saying all of it, but a good chunk of it finds its roots and its justification in some sort of religion.
You are so right about that when you say that a lot of hate has its genesis in the church, and a lot of good also has its genesis in the church. I'm a humanist, right? And what my intent really is to meet people where they are. There was a time, and by the way, my wife is also a deacon So think about a deacon married to a humanist.
Wow. Okay, that's very interesting. Wow.
Right. So my thing is, I've learned as I've gotten older to meet people where they are. So I am no longer trying to
Hmm.
work with somebody's religion, right? What I work with is what they
Right.
do and how they act with people. In other words, if you're a good person, like this woman,
Right.
I fell in love with how this woman behaved and how this woman was because I saw within her honesty that you don't see quite often. First of all, she was ready to tell that hurt that she has for what she had done. And we even spoke about peer pressure that is still predominant, right? That a lot of good
Oh
people
yes.
do bad things because of peer pressure.
Right. Absolutely. And for me, yeah, I mean, and to add to your point about your wife is like, there's a lot of people that I have nothing but love and respect for that are Christian, even Christian Republicans that
Right.
support Trump, and I'm vehemently against Trump,
Right.
but I guess at the end of the day, as I have started grappling with with where religion is, you know, and it's not even really a religion to me. It's just like as I'm struggling with religion is like, we are a free country. We should, and people should be allowed to do something even if we disagree with it, and they're not hurting other people.
You know, my friend,
So,
you just hit it. You just magically hit the number, and that's the reason why
okay, thank you.
I think that's a problem with the church when it comes to, let's say, things like abortion and all of that. You don't have to agree with all these things. You just have to say, let people be free to do what they want. I mean, yes, there are some limits. We don't want somebody to be able to kill somebody else, but
Right,
you just hit the magical thing right there. And later on you may want to jump back into religion and maybe not. In my case, I think I'm completely over with religion, but who knows?
hmm Yeah, I mean, and for me personally, because what I have seen and where I have been at, with Southern Baptists,
Hmm.
I don't think that I mean, I'm like you. I probably will never go back to church again. But at the same time, I don't find, I'm not going to ever be like, I'm not going to fault people for
Exactly.
doing it. And if there is someone out there that is very hate filled and that really is not going to accept people for who they are, I'm not going to scream at them. I'm not, but I just like, I guess the best thing to do is just lead by example. Try to love other people
Right.
and be friendly. And I don't personally feel I need a church to tell me to be nice to other people, but if other people do, that's their right. And thankfully we do live in a free country.
Absolutely. Sir, what's your name?
My name is Scott.
Scott, look, thank you for calling. We're at the end of the show. I really appreciate your commentary and I really appreciate your point of view. So please keep listening, please keep calling, and please remember to share the programs, okay?
I absolutely will. Thank you much, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you so kindly, sir. Bye bye. Okay, folks, that was Scott. Scott had some good stuff to offer there. Look, we're at the end of the show. I had something else to talk about, but like I said, the nurse who came to the house, for all practical purposes, blew me away. I thought she was a wonderful person, and like I told her as she left, for a person who believes in heaven, she believes in heaven. That is exactly where she is going. Folks, please remember this is a show, a program that needs your support. Please go to politicsdoneright.com. Again, that is politicsdoneright.com, and click one of the many options you have on the right of the right of the page, or somewhere on the page, or maybe in the menus or somewhere, to provide a subscribe to the program. We do good stuff, and we'll continue to do good stuff. I'm going to be in DC on Monday. I'm not sure about. I'm going to try to, if I can't do a live show, I'll try to do something from DC on Monday. I'll be in DC Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I'll try to keep in touch on somehow during that time. But until if I don't get a good connection or whatever from the hotel that I'm staying. There may be some issues there, but I think the connections are usually good where I'm at. We will be there. So please go to politicsdoneright.com, and show some support, show some either subscribe or contribute. Or you can go directly to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/politicsdoneright. patreon.com/politicsdoneright. But again, all of that is indexed from politicsdoneright.com. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. Thank you so kindly for listening. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I'll be in touch with you likely over this weekend, but let's continue to do what's necessary to move our country, not theirs, our country forward. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.